pals, welcome to Page vs. Screen, where I take a look at the movie and show adaptations of books and compare them to the original works to see how good they actually are. Today we're gathering around the fire in the parlor with our eggnog. Don't worry, children, I just have a bit of a cold, so I gotta fight that. It's elderberry syrup. Don't worry. Schlancha. Oh yeah, that's good. For a truly Victorian Christmas tradition, a ghost story. In this case, the quintessential Christmas ghost tale, A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. The format is simple. I tell you what the screen did great and what had me yelling. I look at each selection's accuracy, how any changes impacted it overall, and how entertaining it was to decide which did it better, page or the screen. I'm sure a lot of people know the basics, stuff about a guy who loves money more than people, who needs to get taught a little lesson on being a good human being. We don't have anybody like that in today's day and age now, do we? In case you haven't read the original tale, or your memories of it have been lost to time, The Ghost of Christmas Past has granted me the power to take you back for the 3-minute download. There's a man named Ebenezer Scrooge, and 7 years to the day before the start of our tale, his partner Jacob Marley died on Christmas Eve. Marley had so few friends that Scrooge was his only mourner. After all this time, the sign on their business still has both their names on it, but not because he cared about him, no. It was because he was a cheap bastard and didn't want to pay for a new one. He was such a grouch that he wouldn't donate money to the poor. The prisons and workhouses were enough for them, after all. Treated his clerk Bob Cratchit horribly and couldn't muster any joy for his nephew Fred and the young man's wife. The day finally ends and Scrooge goes home. Very startling things happen once there, and suddenly he's confronted by Marley's ghost. Marley warns Scrooge that his life led him to his fate, and that Scrooge's would lead him there as well, but it could avoid doom. By accepting 3 ghosts visiting him. Scrooge tries to brush this off and goes to bed, but as he was told, the first ghost Christmas past visits him. He protests a bit. It's not proper to go out in a nightgown after all, but he goes with him and visits 2 Christmases when he was a child, a fun raucous party that he remembers fondly, the Christmas that he lost his love Belle to his greed, and to 7 years before where Belle is with her family, and Scrooge is not seen in the best of light. All this made him think of those he treated poorly on Christmas Eve. After a fight with past, Scrooge ends up back in his own bed. Terrified, he soon sees light from the next room and investigates. The room is decorated by all the Christmas trappings, and the ghost of Christmas present is there. He takes him out to the streets where people are waiting for Christmas dinner, then off to Bob's, where he and his family are celebrating. The youngest, Tiny Tim, is sick, and Present tells him that Tiny Tim will die if things don't change, saddening Scrooge. Bob toasts Scrooge, which sets Mrs. Cratchit off. She's not his biggest fan by any means, but the night recovers and they enjoy themselves despite being poor. Present takes Scrooge to random places where people are celebrating before landing at Fred's dinner. They make fun of Scrooge, but Fred ultimately pities him. The group plays parlor games, much as Scrooge's enjoyment, and then he sees other celebrations. Present has aged and is hiding hideous, disheveled children named Ignorance and Want. Scrooge wonders if there's any help for them, and his earlier words about prisons and poorhouses are shot back at him. At the clock's next bell, Christmas yet to come, aka future, comes up to him in terrifying silence. He's taken to see people discussing a man who's just died, and none are sad to see him go. Future whisks him to a second-hand shop where people sell their belongings of the deceased man to another man named Joe. Suddenly, he's at the dead man's bed, but fears looking under the sheets to see their face. He's taken to a family who owed the dead man money. They're not sure who will take on the debt, but hey, the new creditor can't be worse. He sees Bob's family. Tiny Tim has died, and the family is in mourning. Scrooge wants to see where he is in the future. He's the dead man! He vows to do better and is back in bed. Ecstatic, he finds out it's Christmas Day. Sharing no expense, he anonymously sends a giant turkey to Bob's family and then goes off to Fred's for dinner after donating money to the charity from the day before. The next day, Bob is late to the office. Scrooge has his grump on, but quickly drops the facade and gives him a raise, helps Bob's family becoming a second dad to Tiny Tim and a good man. Cheers. Now, in the past, I've done a ranking from the best to the worst, but there's like 100 adaptations of this, so I'm doing things a little differently this time around because I don't have time to watch that many all at once. If you recall, at the end of my Oliver Twist video, I did a thing where I grouped them into categories where either the book was way better, it was good but not great, it was as good as the book, or the movie was better. So here and in future A Christmas Carol editions, I'll be doing it this way, putting it into those 4 categories. So again, there's like 100 of these that I'm aware of. 3 hadn't come out yet when I was first looking for ones to watch. 1 doesn't even come out this year, but apparently will be next year. But adaptations do go as far back as 1901. I found most of them, and after asking, I'm looking at some of the animated versions. Some have aspects of other categories, like musicals, but these ones, all animated. So we start in 1962 with Mr. Magoo. This one is set up where Mr. Magoo is playing Scrooge on stage, so we see some bits to do with that, like curtains for intermissions, probably where commercial breaks went in the initial airing. In true Magoo fashion, he doesn't see well, and so that added to spots, like when Scrooge says he could walk a road blindfolded. That's actually in the book, but it hits different when Magoo says it. They cut Scrooge's nephew Fred out entirely, which had some ripple effects throughout, and they changed the order of things. They showed past after present, and while it didn't hurt anything, it had me wondering what they were doing until past showed up. Then there were the other changes. The Cratchits have a goose for Christmas dinner in the book, but in this, they had soup or something like that. It felt like they were pushing the "they were poor" aspect to the extreme. I mean, the family got together and bought a goddamn goose. Let them have that. It's Christmas. A bunch of little stuff got cut from present, and that's livable. It's 58 minutes long. Some things are gonna need to be cut. However, what isn't livable is that they pretty much made present look like Santa wearing a holly crown. It's as if it's a stage play, right? So there are some limitations, and the aging thing may be a little more difficult. I get that. But they could have at least given him a green robe like in the book instead of a red one. He's not Santa. It's not that hard to color something green rather than red. And Scrooge also goes to Bob's on Christmas. The Grump Act gets moved to then. And it makes sense, since they cut Fred from the production. In the end, it made me chuckle here and there, but a lot of the changes and cuts either annoyed me or flat out pissed me off. So while it's not as bad as to be given a bah humbug, it's not as good as the book. So it's going into the good category. We now whoosh off to 1969's A Christmas Carol. So they started out showing the memory of Marley's funeral, which has Scrooge being Stingiest. No. It's not shown in the book, it is mentioned though, so it wasn't actually a bad opener. It portrays Scrooge's character, which is great, but then they also showed random people talking about Scrooge and such. I mean, they gave screen time to that, but not to a proper build-up for Marley's ghost. In the book, Scrooge's door knocker has Marley's face on it for a sec. He swears he sees Marley's face on the fireplace. They did have a bell ring, but it didn't really create suspense. But they gave time to people talking about Scrooge. Something not in the book. Doesn't really add much because we've already established his character. And then they add that. It was a little annoying. And then this was Marley. It wasn't what I was expecting, but if that came at me, I'd believe a lot faster than Scrooge did in the book, which is what happened in the movie, and I can't fault that reaction based on the change to Marley. Then we get to the other ghosts. Past is supposed to look youthful and a bit muscular, but a bit aged as well. Lights coming from his head. He has holly in one hand and a candle snuffer in the other. This guy, old man with a staff. And then present, old man with a lantern. They could have tried, but they didn't. And then they lecture him the whole time, and Scrooge just doubles down on being an ass. And it takes away from his character arc, because he's supposed to change from his own realizations based on his reactions to what he's seeing throughout, and they go spewing his own words back at him that contradict his reactions to what he's seeing, right? Then he's like, oh, wait, crap, I'm being a dick. It's a stronger character arc, and they take that away by slamming him with the moral mallet over and over. Also, Fred was included, but after the initial meeting with him, we don't see him again. Not with Christmas Present, or after the ghosts on the actual Christmas Day, which is clearly supposed to be part of Scrooge making up for being an asshole on Christmas Eve. He was an asshole to Fred, why isn't he making up for that? I mean, there was no real point in having him show up at all, since the rest of it shows Scrooge's character even without it. If they're going to include Fred, they should have at least shown the dinner when Scrooge was going around with Present, That would have been a reason. Overall, they fucked around with foundational aspects of the characters and didn't truly seem to understand how to build mood, which is essential in any story, but especially in a ghost story. So to you, 1969, I say, bah humbug. Bah humbug. Next up, we join B.A.H. Humbug, yes, that is his name, in 1978 for the Rankin Bass production of The Stingiest Man in Town. Now, these two were responsible for the classic claymation Christmas movies like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Santa Claus is Coming to Town, the traditional animation of Frosty the Snowman, and so many others. I hadn't seen this specific one before, so I did go into it with expectations. Lots of expectations. So they start with the final outcome, and it was kind of more of a this is how we got here movie. I'm still not sure how I feel about that, if I'm being honest. Or maybe it's just how they presented it, because it looked like they were cutting out the beginning at the office, and then it hits a certain point, which is just before Marley's ghost, and then it goes back and starts there. Like, it was kind of weird, and I was like, what the hell's going on? But when we finally get into the story, and Scrooge is getting home, they include Marley's face on the door knocker. I appreciated the creepier nature of it. I mean, it is a ghost story after all, but it was visually creepier than I was expecting for a Rankin Bass production. And Marley looked pretty damn good to it, to be honest. Like, he was really close to the book's description. But then they fucked up with past. I mean, okay, he's got the light snuffer on the holly, but he's an out-and-out old man. Again. And then we have present. He may be wearing a green robe and a holly crown, so woohoo. However, he's an old man straight from the start again. They're not restrained by it being a stage production within the world of this animation, so why can't they have him be younger and then age throughout? Luckily, the ghosts didn't bash Scrooge with the moral mallet, but they didn't really throw his words back at him either, and it's kind of important to realize where he fucked up. It kind of fits in with the producer's vibe, but it's still annoying. And of course, it being Rankin Bass, it's musical. Most of the songs worked, but they put in one where Bob's eldest daughter, Martha, is singing about how people can be good, and yes, Tiny Tim, there is the Santa Claus. Because Tiny Tim's neighbors were jerks, and told him that there wasn't one. Now don't worry, kiddies, okay? There is a Santa Claus. Those neighbors were being mean, and they lied to Tiny Tim. Okay, so no worries, Santa will be visiting your home on Christmas Eve. I promise. The common description of Santa that we know and love was more than 20 years old by the time A Christmas Carol was published. So yes, Santa, of course, and still does, bring presents to the good kiddies before the story came out, but he's not really mentioned in the story, so it was a random addition to the movie, taking up screen time. They could have done a song about people being good if they wanted to, leaning into like either Tiny Tim as a cripple or we're poor but we have a lot of love aspect of their family. Santa did not need to be added this time. I think it's a song that ate into the runtime as well, and it cut out parts with Future, and that section felt really, really rushed. So while it's very entertaining, Rankin Bass always is, and I wanted to put it in the as good section, some of the overall changes, cuts, and additions kind of took away from the story. So, I bumped it down to good. Sauntering over to 1979, we find ourselves with Bugs and the Looney Tunes gang for their version. So we get a Christmas Carol with a Looney Tunes twist. Yosemite Sam is Sam Scrooge, Porky Pig is Bob Cratchit, Tweety is Tiny Tim, Bugs is kind of a stand-in for Fred Marley and the other ghosts, and Sylvester, Pepe Le Pew, Foghorn Leghorn, and Elmer Fudd are supporting cast. Now, disclaimer, I'm like 99% sure I watched this when I was a kid. I remembered bits and pieces, but it's been a while since I last saw it. So, on we go. Sam is counting money and Bob is freezing, but Sam won't give him any more coal. Bugs comes in to bring Christmas cheer and is kicked out. Bugs won't be stopped though and keeps trying. He even gives Bob some coal, but Sylvester, Sam's cat, rats him out and Sam steals it back. The straw that breaks the back is when Bugs brings in the others as carolers, though, and Sam fires Bob. Bob loses his lights, aka his candle, because he couldn't pay, and Sam forecloses on the house, so Bob and his family have to be out. Bugs, who is visiting them, says,
"Of course you realize this means war."
He does things like adding snow to Sam's bath and pretends to be a destructive ghost, eventually confronting Sam, telling him he's taking him to the man in the red suit, as in the man downstairs. Sam vows to do better, he makes Bob a partner, and has dinner with Bob's family and Bugs. In the end, this 8-minute short encapsulates the spirit and message of the story. Don't be a dick! While being its own thing from beginning to end. It didn't go somewhat accurate. Random thing that has nothing to do with anything, somewhat accurate. So I'm going to put this one in the as good category. A Quick Flight to Australia in 1982 brings us another adaptation of A Christmas Carol. If you've seen my Alice in Wonderland Part 1 video, you'll know I really didn't like the Aussie versions, but I'm trying to look at this with fresh eyes, even though it's the same production company. And you know what? From what I've looked at so far, this one is one of the most accurate adaptations. Very little was cut and not a lot was notably changed. That being said, Ghosts of Christmas Past and Present, I don't know what all these people have against these ghosts, but they keep fucking around with them. This time, Past was a young man. Great, but they got rid of the age aspects completely. He's in what's more of a belted toga rather than a robe, and none of his props, no light. Present, he's an old man again, in a red robe. But hey, he's got Holly Cran and a torch, so that's something. They did include Bob's trip home from the office as written, as well as a version of Ignorance and Want with Present. They weren't in any of the other adaptations I had watched at this point, and I was really excited to see those details added. It was nice. A couple little things were added, but one big thing was during Future's stint, and it wasn't bad. In the book, Scrooge goes for dinner at a tavern on the way home on Christmas Eve. This was included. When he's with Future, they go to the tavern around his usual lunchtime, but his future self isn't there, and he isn't working at his office either. Somebody else is. He's curious as to what's going on, and is guessing things except for that he's the dead man. I actually didn't mind that, because it furthers the actual plot, in a way, and shows Scrooge's blindness to things. Future's trying to tell him, in his way, but Scrooge is just not catching on. So Scrooge, Bob, and Joe, and some of the supporting cast, they felt real, and most of the dialogue was straight from the book, though a lot of the others, including past and present, felt really wooden. They might as well have just been Pinocchio before he was a real boy. No, that's how wooden they were. And, well, maybe not as entertaining as some of the others. I blame the performances, Performance is everything. It was one of the most accurate, and the few changes and additions made sense. So I would say it's as good as the book. If you like to talk to tomatoes, if a squash can make you smile, if you like to waltz with potatoes, up and down the produce aisle, have I got an adaptation for you. Or rather something inspired by A Christmas Carol, because VeggieTales decided to make this into an Easter Carol. So we got Granny Nezer, who died before the story starts. She used to paint Easter eggs for a living. When she died, her grandson, Ebenezer Nezer, took over and made some upgrades, making colorful plastic eggs. Bob and Larry work there, and they want Sunday off because it's Easter Sunday, and they want to see the new stained glass window unveiling. He says no, and ends up firing them when they don't want to go along with his new idea.
Easterland, where Easter is forever!
It's going to go where the church is, and demolition starts on Sunday. Junior Asparagus, this version's Tiny Tim, and his dad, who's a church pastor, are obviously not happy about this. Nezer falls asleep at the office, and an angel named Hope comes out of an egg that's in the room. She covers the role of all the ghosts. They go to the past where he's a kid in church with his Granny Nezer. She's trying to get him to pay attention, but he only cares about his eggs. In the present, the Asparaguses and a carrot dude are discussing things. We learn that Granny Nezer commissioned the new stained glass window before she died, and Junior is also sick, and it's his last Easter if things don't change. In the future, crime has increased, and the local orphanage is closed because the church isn't there to inspire people anymore, and Junior has died. Nezer wakes up. It's Christmas Sunday. He stops the demo and vows to help people. Throughout all of this, Bob and Larry are trying to steal the blueprints for Easterland so it can't be built, but because of changes to the factory, it's about to blow up, and Bob is stuck inside. Nezer saves him, there's a God bless us from Junior, and scene. Now, the original story is set in the 19th century, in London. But considering the setting, and the, general nature of things in that place at that time, there's minimal religious aspects brought in. And by that I mean mentions of God or Jesus and whatnot. During a thing about Christmas, right? The main message of all of this is, don't be a dick. Which is something that can be agreed upon regardless of background. They turn the message of this movie, including an entire song about it that I actually did skip because I didn't want to watch it, into Jesus is the reason for the Easter season, with a smattering of, don't be a dick. But even then, that's not entirely true, because Nezer wanted to sell his eggs to make money so he could build Easterland. Why did he want to build it? It was his grand's favorite holiday, and he wanted to honor her. He was going about it in a misguided way, and he was by no means the best person, but his basic desires weren't rooted in malicious intent and douchebaggery like Scrooge's. Religious Christian messaging is on brand for VeggieTales, even taking this meme into consideration. Seriously, if you've never seen it, there's actually a song all about that. But since don't be a dick is a good message, regardless of background, they could have kept true to the original message and still have been on brand. So this gets the big ol' bah humbug from me. Next, we land on Disney's 2009 adaptation. There is so much I could say about this movie, but time is running short, so I'm going to start with some of what I didn't like quickly. The almost lifelike 3D animation is disconcerting. If I understand it correctly, it's done with all the actors hooked up to motion capture stuff, because you can kind of see who it is under that digital mask. At that point, just have the actual actors on screen. I mean, we have green screens. We can make it work with one person playing multiple roles, like in this movie. They also threw in some comedic bits. Well, one worked very well, others didn't. They slipped in one during a chase scene with Future. Scrooge gets shrunk down and goes through some refuse pipe or something, and he makes some offhand comments. The way it was done, it felt like it was supposed to be some sort of comic relief in the middle of the chase. It took me out of the moment rather than extending it, right? And also, not every movie needs a high-action chase scene. It's a Christmas Carol, not Fast and the Furious 11,000. But there's a lot of love to go along with this movie. I'll start with my biggest pet peeve from past, the ghosts and their appearance. Well, I wouldn't say I love Past's look. I mean, he's a lit candle with hands holding the snuff cap and holly. It's an interesting way to go. But as far as I've seen, there's been worse. But present? Ho ho ho. Ho ho ho. Present is just... I mean, look at this. Look at this, okay? He's a giant, dark brown hair, holly crown, horn of plenty torch, and a green robe that's slightly open. It's like he stepped straight out of the book, and he ages throughout. But at the end of his time, he's an old man, and there's a claw under his robe, and ignorance and want, they're there. Oh my god, so good. And the build-up, oh my god, the build-up to Marley's ghost. If you want to learn how to build atmosphere and tension, watch the scene. Watch that scene. Start when he's first getting home, and and he sees the door knocker, right? So start from there and watch just until Marley, just as Marley's coming in. Oh, so good. Like when he's in his room and it's silent, and then one little bell starts. And then a second, and it builds, and it's just, it's so well done. So take goddamn notes, 1969, because that is how you do it. Now, most of the dialogue is straight from the book, but even changes to dialogue didn't feel out of place. Like when we first meet Present, there's a part of the book where he asks if Scrooge met his brothers, and he has over 1,800 of them. Well, in the movie, they expand on it, and he says 1,842 brothers. This makes him the 1843rd present. What year did A Christmas Carol come out? 1843. So clever. Ha. And okay, there's so much more I could say. There's one more stop to make, so it's time to put this into a category. So if you couldn't tell, I really did like this one. And there's a part of me that's going like, oh, bless us everyone. But there are things that took me out of the flow of the story. It wasn't just during the chase scene, and that really got to me because it was really well done otherwise. And they just did these random things and annoyed me enough collectively. I couldn't put it in that tier, even though it's the most accurate and one of the most entertaining that I've seen. It's probably one of the closest I've ever gotten to saying that something is better than the book, though. If you haven't watched it yet, finish watching this video, and then go and watch that. And do it today. Do it today. The last stop today is Smurfville. That's right, the Smurfs joined in for this story inspired by A Christmas Carol. In this one, Grouchy Smurf lives up to his name and is a grouch about Christmas, but it used to be one of the only times that he really wasn't one completely. Papa Smurf makes a potion that turns into some glowing ball thing, and it goes into Grouchy's drink, his Smurf nog, actually, and it knocks him out. And then suddenly, a glowing Smurfette shows up as past and takes him to his past. So Grouchy is happy because it's Christmas and he gets prezzies. At first he doesn't want to join in on the general festivities, but he starts getting into it. And he wants a hang glider. He wants it so bad, but he gets a new hat like everybody else. Year after year after year. The most recent Christmas, he's presented with a box that looks like it's a hang glider, and he's so excited, and then it's not. He gets a hat and storms off. Then Brainy shows up as present and shows him what happens without Grouchy to help decorate. Clumsy gets involved and everything literally ends up on fire. Not even kidding, everything is in flames. We also see Papa Smurf making hats and makes them custom for each Smurf. As an example, Greedy gets a pocket for extra Smurf berries. Hefty stands in for Future, and he shows him the next day rather than a future year's Christmas. The others had gone into the West Woods to get a new tree in hopes Grouchy's spirits would be lifted by it, but they don't come back because Gargamel caught them! After being chased by Azrael the cat, Grouchy falls into Gargamel's cauldron during a rescue attempt, and he lands back at home. Grouchy decorates the place and bakes fruitcake before everybody else gets up. He's happy for his hat and realizes it must have something special too, and it does, a parachute hang glider thing. But don't worry, he's still Grouchy. He hates the snow, and being cold, and none. I love the flip between full-on 3D animation and traditional animation. It was a fun thing and made it very clear on what was reality and what was, well, we'll call it a dream. No, let's not sugarcoat it. Grouchy was tripping balls. Whatever Papa Smurf did, it took him on a wild ride. And I also don't blame Grouchy for getting upset at the last Christmas after that prank gift. I mean, that's not an appropriate gift prank. A box and a box and a box with some duct tape. While annoying for the recipient, still better. What they did is just mean. And considering this is the Smurfs here, this is a goddamn good representation of present. Bright color robes, a holly wreath, his candles instead of him having the torch, which makes sense because, he needs his hands free to do his equations. But how did the Smurfs do it better than true blue proper adaptations? How? Tell me, how? Now, overall it was cute, and, well, some of the changes made sense because it was the damn Smurfs. But even though it was enjoyable to watch, I'm gonna say this one was good, but not as good as the book. So that's all for this one. I have no more. The ghosts of Christmas past and present have decided that my time is done, and there is no more, unless you remember. In which case you can see me being an idiot for a few minutes straight, because I am not a one-take wonder. At all. Even without my nummy nog. And I'm also going to have a video going into a bit more about the 2009 A Christmas Carol, because that was, seriously, I have 2 pages of notes for it. Everything else is a less than a page, so I've got like double the amount of stuff in comparison to everything else. And the link to membership is in the description. And don't forget, because I should be saying something like this in every video, and I kind of hate it, and I keep forgetting because I hate it, but, I should be saying this. Like and share, ring the bell, comment down below, then you'll always see the next installment of my show. And join me next time, where I'll be taking a look at the adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. So until next time, pals, regardless of what you celebrate at this time of the year and any other time of the year, blessed be. Is this counterintuitive to trying to talk fast and be understandable? Probably.